You're listening to Season 10 of Mobile Suit Breakdown, a weekly podcast covering the entirety of sci-fi mega franchise Mobile Suit Gundam, from 1979 to today.
This is episode 10.25, Home Again, and we're your hosts. I'm Tom, fan of mobile suits, but super fan of petite mobile suits.
And I'm Nina, new to Victory Gundam, and we've all heard the saying, better to beg forgiveness than to ask permission, but how many of us would have Uso's commitment if begging forgiveness meant take a punch in the face from someone who outweighs you by 60 or more pounds? Mobile Suit Breakdown is made possible by our paying subscribers on Patreon. Thank you all, and special thanks to our newest patrons, Zek and Nico H. You keep MSB Genki.
This week, Victory episode 25, Tekikan to Tekichi e, or To Enemy Ships and Enemy Lands. The episode was written by Okeya Akira, storyboarded and directed by Nishimori Akira, with Itakura Kazuhiro in charge of animation. Itakura, working out of Nakamura Pro for most of his career, will go on to draw for Turn A, Seed, Hathaway, and The Witch from Mercury, along with a lot of other 90s and 2000s era mecha shows. As far as I can tell, this is Itakura's first time working on Gundam in any capacity, and his first time as animation director for any project. Now, the recap.
For acting alone and without orders when he helped the Highland families reunite and then go to Zanskar, Captain Gomez punches Uso once hard in the face. Uso seems to have expected this and stands at attention, hands behind his back, even as the force of the punch launches him across the hangar and up against the leg of a mobile suit. But that's all the punishment they have time for. The Muterman fleet is returning from Zanskar, and the Lean Horse Jr. is at risk of being trapped between the enemy colony and the enemy fleet. They must punch through the advanced squadron quickly and waste no time launching mobile suits. Flying alongside Uso, Peggy tells him that she knows he wants to go back to the Zanskar capital to see Shakti again, but they have to protect their home first. And the crew of the Lean Horse Jr. has become his home. Over time, they've all come to know and care for each other, and as they dodge missile barrages and mobile suit attacks, it's obvious that their teamwork has improved. Chronicle's new Kontio squadron has sortied alongside the returning fleet, and Zanskar forces manage to flank the Lean Horse Jr., blocking the escape route and bringing the League militaire ship into the range of their beam cannons. The Allied Side 2 fleet cannot help them. Their first priority is to retreat, preserving as many of their own ships and mobile suits as possible. Things look dire as the Lean Horse Jr., under heavy fire, can only support their mobile suits and wait for an opportunity to retreat. Losing what little composure he has, Jin Jahanam sobs, "What's the real Jin Jahanam doing now?" to the consternation of the bridge crew, who did not know he was an imposter. Outnumbered, the League militaire pilots spread themselves out to provide better cover to the Lean Horse, but this leaves individual pilots more vulnerable. Peggy, caught between two of Zanskar's new crowbeak weapons, is hit by their beams. Fire breaks out in her cockpit. Intent on saving the woman who has come to feel like a big sister, Uso leans into his idiosyncratic fighting style. He disconnects the various Victory Gundam parts, using them to form a defensive line. Having anticipated Uso's crazy habit of sacrificing the Victory's parts, Captain Gomez has organized Odello and Warren to prepare and launch a whole new set, their timing perfected by weeks of practice. Fired up by Uso's heroic gambit, Junko, Marbet, and Oliver finally clear an escape route. Uso holds off the last of the Kontio squadron until Chronicle orders a retreat. His pilots are too inexperienced in their new mobile suits to fight the kid genius Gundam pilot. On the verge of giving chase, Uso is hailed by the Fishbone. They know he gets caught up in the heat of battle, so they came to rein him in, but now find that they are all cut off from the Lean Horse Jr. Marbet, gone to retrieve Peggy, joins them, and while they treat Peggy's burnt legs with the first aid available on the Fishbone, they discuss what to do. They may get them in trouble with Captain Gomez, but they decide that their best option is to infiltrate Zanskar. They can leave Peggy with the local Red Cross to receive medical care, while the rest of them do what they can to disrupt Zanskar from the inside. They cover the fishbone in some kind of temporary red sheeting and fly it close to the underside of a much larger enemy ship. Peggy, Marbet, and Uso sneak their mobile suits into the ship's hangar and nestle them among the crowd of damaged mobile suits. Not content to wait, Uso leaves his cockpit, trying to find out more about the ship. Instead, he stumbles directly into the middle of some crew members preparing for the ship's arrival at port. Thinking fast, Uso pretends to be a refugee looking for his parents, and, discounting any possibility that this young boy could be a threat, they decide to keep him with them until after the arrival ceremony. The whole crew stand at attention on one of the launch decks, while Muterman himself is greeted and congratulated by Tassilo, Wago, and his retinue, including Chronicle Asher. From an elevated walkway, Queen Maria congratulates them on their victory and speaks of the righteousness of their cause. Someone spots Uso as the ceremony ends, and in desperation, he uses his verniers to launch himself at the Queen. "Mercy! I'm Uso, Shakti's friend! Mercy!" He is detained by 2 guards, but then Peggy, carrying the victory, comes charging out of the ship. She fires on the elevated walkway while Maria's guards shoot back and colony security scrambles their defensive mobile suits. In the chaos, Uso gets back to the Victory Gundam, and the fishbone flies into port. Chronicle orders Maria's guards to get her out of there. One is shot before they even make it off the walkway. Another gets her to a small hovercraft and takes off down a passage, only for the Victory Gundam to knock him from the craft. Maria does not run but waits, staring up at the mobile suit. Uso lowers the Victory's hand and with great politeness and formality asks Shakti's mother to come with him. I am astonished Peggy survived the episode.
Ha.
There were so many death flags for Peggy throughout this episode.
Episode's not over yet. That was a cliffhanger ending.
Is it a 2-parter?
I mean, I don't think it's like... It's not one of those where the episode is called Part 1, but like, come on. That was not a real ending. That was absolutely a in media res, cut it off, we're continuing this exact storyline from this exact moment next week.
I suppose, but she still survived the episode, which I was not expecting. Being paired with Uso, bonding with Uso, generally speaking, that gets Shrikes killed.
Appearing on screen, having lines, all of these things get Shrikes killed. And she got wounded. That was another...
And you have to admit, it's when they bond emotionally with Uso that they are at the height of danger.
Oh,
the
yeah.
most danger.
Uso declared her to be a precious big sister, and so she's doomed.
Not to mention that moment where Chronicle has her in his sights. Classic doomed character moment in Gundam. The color shift changes, the background changes, the sound changes. Everything goes slow motion.
And then cut to the eye catch.
Mm-hmm.
And we come back in on Uso miraculously saving her at the last second. Good for him.
And she's still fighting by the end, so... We will see what next episode has in store.
I mean, yeah, but she's wounded and her mobile suit is damaged and she's going off on her own to save the others.
Did you notice her mobile suit is damaged in much the same way she is? Its legs are messed up and her legs are messed up.
You'd better believe I noticed that.
I wouldn't put money on her chances of getting through the next episode, but she got through this one.
And you can't take that away from her.
You mentioned Uso's line about her being a dear or beloved older sister. To the extent that this episode felt as if it had any kind of a theme, I thought the theme was very much the rewards of being loved and the mortifying ordeal of being known.
Explicate that a little bit for me.
After Uso's punishment punch to the face, several of the older pilots comment to him that they know he wants to go back and help Shakti, that they know this isn't over, but that he needs to focus right now. He thinks, they see through me, that's not good. Because they have gotten to know him. There are numerous moments when people express how much they value him and his talents, that they wish that they could help him more or that they could help him in his goal to get back to Shakti. Marbet and Peggy call him amazing and heroic. Oliver says, oh, I'll use Uso's tactics. Gomez calls them crazy habits. But all of them have started getting to know Uso, how he thinks, how he fights, what's important to him. And in some ways, that's bad for Uso because it means they can anticipate his actions and try to prevent him from doing things he wants to do. But in other ways, it's good. Could he have that older sister feeling about Peggy if they didn't know each other better? Chronicle comments on how much better they're all doing at teamwork. They all fight together more fluidly. Think about when Odello launches another set of mobile suit parts for Uso. And Uso's like, oh, good timing. And compare that to when they were first trying to work out the timings of these launches and what a struggle it was.
Peggy has that line about how we have to defend the Lean Horse Jr. because we have to protect the place that we go back to, our home.
Yeah, that was such an interesting little speech she makes about home and new types.
If you understand the importance of your home, maybe you can become a new type. It's an awkward line in the English, but the way you're talking about the episode as a whole, about the importance of being known and knowing, I think probably that helps to explain that line. It's not the existence of a place to go back to. It's not having a bunk that is yours that you can sleep in that makes you a new type. It's the connections with the other people that make a ship into a home.
A place you belong and belongs to you.
Because Uso has always had a physical place to go back to. Casarelia, the Camion, the Lean Horse originally. But now he has not just a place to go back to, but a home in its spiritual sense.
And how important that is for the pursuit of his other goals, for trying to go see Shakti again, for anything else he might try to do, having that home base to come back to, having these people who care about him and who are all looking out for each other. Look at the fact that the fishbone comes out to fetch him, because they know Uso is going to get really caught up in the fighting and is going to wind up farther from the Lean Horse Jr. than he's supposed to be. And so they go. They know Uso always blames everything that goes wrong on himself, and so Peggy is ready when he blames her injury on himself to be like, I am a soldier, you know. This is a thing I choose to do.
And yeah, it makes it harder for him to go off on his own and do his own thing, but it also means that they can help him to accomplish his goals. They can help him to find Shakti again. And maybe, we'll come back to this because I have some serious issues with some of the script elements in this episode, but maybe that's why Marbet suggests that they go back to the Zanskar homeland and mix it up a little bit there. Like I said, we'll come back to that because I'm not convinced. But as a general matter, yeah, them knowing him, understanding his goals, liking him, and wanting him to succeed is great. And
Odello stuffing crackers or bread or something in his mouth, being like, part of your responsibility is eating. Stop talking about how everything is your fault and eat.
You need a team. You need a family. And that's like what Gomez punches him for in the beginning, although it's not entirely clear in this episode, is because he went off on his own. Without telling anybody, without getting permission. He just took the victory and went off to act independently. And when he's got all of these people counting on him and also willing to help him, that kind of attitude, that kind of action is counterproductive.
I saw the punishment a bit differently, especially in the context of Marbet bringing it up again when they're talking about the infiltration.
See, that's another of my issues. I don't understand what gets you punched in the Ligue Militaire. I thought I understood, because after the Oliver punch way early on and after the Gomez punch in this episode, I thought it was about taking independent action, going off on your own and risking everything. But then why would Odello and Warren and Alicia get punched for going off on their own after they have already been separated from the rest of the fleet through no fault of their own?
Right. I don't understand why them choosing to go infiltrate the colony when they frankly cannot reunite with the ship would result in them being punished.
Also because they were equally complicit in running off the last time, and yet only Uso got punished. So maybe the idea was that they weren't really part of the Ligue Militaire, and so they didn't have the same obligations, but now they do?
So, I don't love how it's handled. It's absolutely confusing. But I think that the way that the episode uses the punishments is actually less about there's a list of rules and when you break them you are punished kind of a thing, and actually more about how when you're part of a community and you start to understand its customs and rules, often you can break those rules as long as you know what the consequences will be and are willing to accept them. That at no point here has Uso been jailed or thrown in a brig. At no point has he been pulled from mobile suit duty or denied access to the Victory Gundam. His punishments have been these individual punches, which I don't approve of, but that's how they handle things in the Ligue Militaire, and, some scolding. And that's about it.
And everybody in that scene knows that Uso's gonna do it again.
Right. And they can't really stop him, and they're not really trying to. And in a way, Marbet bringing up, hey, we might get punished for this, are you all still willing to do it, is about getting their buy-in to this system. We're part of this community, and it has these rules and these processes, or maybe even not rules. Maybe some of it is just like the capriciousness of whoever is in charge, and they can decide to punch you for whatever, really. But if you're willing to risk that, then you have a lot of leeway to do what you want.
Counterpoint, maybe Marbet is just the ultimate wingwoman. She proposes this second raid on Zanskar's homeland in order to get Uso an opportunity to see Shakti again, and she mentions the getting punched in order to give Odello a chance to look cool by saying, I'll take the punch for you, Alicia.
Perhaps I'm expecting too much from Gundam, but didn't it feel out of character for Alicia, who has always been kind of hard-nosed and hard-working, and I don't need some guy to be, gallant for me. I don't need a knight in shining armor to be like, ooh, the punch looks like it hurts. Ooh, thank you, Odello, for offering to take a punch for me.
Yeah. Also, Alicia, who has never been interested in combat and, has actually kind of tried to shy away from it, is now doing all the combat stuff that Martina would normally do. No, this really feels like they didn't have a super great handle on the two different sisters' individual characters, just as there isn't really that much of a difference between Tomasz and Karl. And with Martina absent, they just have Alicia doing Martina things. I actually thought that whole scene when they're in the fishbone deciding what to do after being separated from Junior, I thought that whole scene was terrible, really badly written, because it's the bridge between these two halves of the episode. They're in dire straits both because of Peggy's wound and because there's an enemy formation in between them and Junior, so they can't go back home.
Gosh, there were a few lines in this scene that were either extremely confusing or just kind of didn't feel like they added anything. And the line about how the main fleet is behind the fleet that's ahead of the Lean Force Junior.
There's a couple of those throughout the episode. Anyway, the real problem with this scene is not these sort of more superficial things to me, but we've outlined two very specific problems that they have. Peggy is injured and needs medical care. They're separated from their ship and they need to be able to get back to it. And then Marbet is like, oh, I know the solution. Let's go attack Zanskar's homeland. A solution that solves neither of the identified problems in any way.
She points out that they should be able to turn Peggy over, or Peggy should be able to turn herself over to the local Red Cross.
But that's not the point of the mission.
No.
Right? That's they're oh, we need to get Peggy to a doctor. Marbet then proposes this attack, and someone is actually how does that help Peggy? And she's like, oh, Peggy's fine, don't worry about her. She's stable. And if there's an issue, we can just turn her over to the Red Cross. Why does Marbet want to do this? What is the actual goal of this attack? In the previous episode, we had a very clear goal for the raid. Here we have motivations, but they don't connect with the actions.
I had not interpreted her as proposing a violent raid. I had interpreted her as proposing that they infiltrate the colony and then find some way to cause trouble once they were inside. Things kind of go pear-shaped and take a turn. But I did not think she was proposing that things go the way that they end up going.
that's, I think, another fault of this, is it's very unclear what she's actually proposing. We don't actually know what they're trying to accomplish, so we don't know if they're succeeding or failing.
Marbet doesn't have the greatest grasp of strategy or tactics.
Is she just trying to make a name for herself? Is this an expression of bloodthirst? Is she trying to help Uso get back to Shakti?
So where else can they go? They don't have anywhere else to go.
Well, they can pretend to be a meteor, right? We know that they can do that because they do that.
And just wait?
Yeah. Like, the problem that has been outlined here is that the Junior is leaving Side 2's airspace. There's a fleet in between them and Junior, but that fleet is headed back to the homeland. All they need to do is wait until it goes by.
I agree with you that it doesn't make sense.
You can easily imagine various different explanations for what they're doing and why they're doing it.
Or just that Marbet is impulsive. She thinks their chances of sneaking into the colony are better than their chances of hoping to wait quietly and not be noticed.
And if it were just Marbet, sure, but why does everyone else go along with her? What's the actual plan? And then once they're actually sneaking in, there's this other moment where Uso goes to talk to Peggy after she's like separated from the fishbone. And he's like, oh, you stay here. I'm going to go check it out. I'm going to look around, see what the situation is. And then immediately, the very next cut, the next second, he's like drifting through the hangar, flailing his arms like he's lost control of himself. He drifts through this group of Zanskar officers. One of them grabs him. He gets arrested. And it's not entirely clear to me whether this is his plan to find out what's going on. Like, oh, I'll feign that I'm out of control. I'll pretend that my toilet pack is overflowing. More opportunities for toilet humor. And because I'm a kid and pretending to be a refugee, they won't hurt me. I'll be fine, and I'll find an opportunity to escape later. Is this Uso the mastermind? Or did he lose control of himself? Did he crash into something? Did a bit of drifting debris knock him out of alignment? Like, did things go wrong and he's improvising as he goes? Or is this all his master plan? Without knowing which of those it is, I don't know how to contextualize everything else that happens.
I sort of split the difference. It's an awkward cut. It's unclear why he loses control of his thrusters or his movement through the area. I do love that they hide themselves among a bunch of damaged mobile suits.
Yeah,
that's
great.
So clever. So the flow is not great from him being like, all right, I'm going to scope out information. My impression was very much that he had not intended to drift into this group or to get caught. And then that thinking quickly on his feet, he makes a bunch of excuses that, if they thought about it, these adults would probably question more closely. What does he mean he's looking for his parents on a battleship, for instance?
Mm-hmm.
How did he get there?
Mm-hmm.
But Uso knows that people often overlook him because of his age. He probably knows that if he brings up the toilet pack, the adults will go like, ew, or like, ugh, fine. They will get distracted by this detail.
It feels increasingly incongruous to us as the audience because Uso has been visibly maturing quite significantly over the course of the last few episodes, over the whole show, really. He doesn't feel like the kind of little kid who would make these kinds of mistakes anymore.
But adults classically really bad at gauging relative maturity or ages of children.
Absolutely. 100%. It's just funny for us.
One line that stood out to me as odd was the one after Oliver decides he's going to try fighting like Uso. And he says in the subtitles, "It's thrilling. I almost don't want to tell the women about this feeling."
Yeah, I don't understand that.
What?
This was an episode where if there had been 1 or 2 or 3 lines like this, I probably would have tried to translate them. But when it's every other line, it just got to be too much. And I was like, all right, I accept it. I accept whatever they're doing here, and I'm just going to roll with the English translation as it exists.
I think that's a fairly decent translation of what is said in the Japanese. I just don't understand what it's doing here.
Mm-hmm.
The women who you fight alongside, who are in fact better fighters than you? Like, what?
They would never understand the feeling of detaching your boots and using them as a flying bomb.
Even though we see Peggy use a set of Uso's boots as a gun.
No, that's the overhang pack.
Oh, that's the pack. Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure which part that was.
I don't think Uso's boots shoot. He's not a Shaitarn.
Okay.
Although he can attach a gun to his calf, so kind of his boots shoot.
There was so much great Mobile Suit and Mobile Suit fighting stuff in this episode. It's a really great episode for combat. Love the crow beaks. Love that they have beam teeth for some reason, in addition to being able to shoot beams.
Just like real crows. They have knives for teeth.
Various people using the Victory parts as weapons, using them for distraction, for feints, or to cover more area, as Uso does when he creates that sort of wall, that line. Though I wondered, is he controlling them remotely, or are they on autopilot, or what moves and controls those parts? Because there's been no indication of, what was it called that Lala had, like cybernetic control, or that he's using his like mind to control them remotely.
Yeah, you're thinking of a Psychomu.
Thank you. There's been no Psychomu or Psychomu type technology even pointed at.
It does seem like remote control, but that's a little weird in a Minovsky particle-infused battlefield, especially when all of the Zanskar suits that use these remote weapons clearly have them attached by wire, including the crowbeaks.
We know that the various Victory parts are on some kind of autopilot for docking. And it's finicky. It's not perfect autopilot, otherwise the timing of the docking wouldn't be so difficult to get down.
Perhaps it's some sort of very local remote control, like autopilot for the most part, and then when they get very close, he can do a little bit of remote control.
One of the final super cool Mobile Suit moments, Uso using two beam sabers to like launch one of the beam sabers spinning at someone else.
I think he actually uses
both?
both beam sabers and then throws it like a shuriken. I don't.
But something about
how do they stay together?
Yeah, I wasn't even sure if he threw both, or if it was almost like, I'm reminded of the action of pulling a top that's on a string, that he creates this friction between the two blades to get one of them spinning and then like launches it or something. I don't know. It's cool.
I think it would be cooler if it was the thing you're describing, but regrettably no. They're really committed to making the separation and combination gimmick for the Victory cool and integral to the story, or at least integral to the fights, to the visual story. Because like the Double Zeta also separated into 3 parts that flew around independently and then combined to make a mobile suit. But in Double Zeta, they were always useless or inconvenient. It was really just all about getting the mobile suit combined and then letting Judo do his thing.
You would think that they would have anticipated all of this when they designed the Victory, that this would have been a planned use case for being able to separate and recombine and swap out parts. And yet, everyone seems surprised when Uso first starts to do it, and as we see them adopting the technique more broadly, it's kind of revelatory to these other pilots.
Well, it's a bit like in The Last Jedi, when the Republic fleet sends one of their cruisers into hyperdrive, but like directly at the enemy fleet in order to create some kind of hyperdrive interaction, some sort of hyperdrive crisis that destroys a huge portion of the pursuing fleet. And then the question is like, well, if you could do that with a ship, why don't you do that with a ship in every engagement? And there are explanations for why. It's a 1,000,000-to-1 shot. It probably shouldn't have worked. It requires the sacrifice of a whole ship. It requires the enemy formation to be in a particular, But once you show that that's the thing you can do and that it's really powerful, it becomes like, okay, well, why aren't we doing that all the time? Why is it more effective for Oliver to send his boots flying into the enemy hangar than it is to just shoot into the enemy hangar?
Maybe the physical damage of the big heavy boots crashing into stuff?
Could be. I'm not sure. Clearly it is.
Shields and shielding get mentioned at a couple of different points. I cannot recall if this has been dealt with explicitly, but it's possible that beam-based shielding holds up better against beam attacks, but not against like physical objects. Again, we're in a position to have to speculate because it's not very clear.
Maybe the inside of the Victory is lined with a new and highly unstable element called explodium.
There are a couple of other interesting tidbits dropped about sort of the war as a whole. Peggy mentions that if it were full-scale war, not this thing that they're doing right now, but if it were full-scale war, Zanskar really wouldn't be a threat. Even the Mutterman fleet wouldn't really be a threat.
Well, Peggy doesn't entirely mention that. She says, if this were a full-scale war, even Zanskar ...
Yeah, but based on the context of their earlier conversation, they get interrupted. But based on what they were talking about before and Uso talking about sort of the severity of the threat, the implication is that Zanskar would not be this much of an issue if there weren't so much sort of fence sitting and people trying to wait it out before they decide whether to get involved.
Mm-hmm. Although this Side 2 alliance didn't put up much of a fight.
If there was any concern that maybe Maria is in fact a good person who's merely been co-opted or forced by other people in power to be a figurehead for this country, I mostly don't have that anymore after her extremely might makes right little speech to the returning fleet.
Well, if she's forced to be a figurehead and say what they want her to say, then surely in this public address to the army with her armed guards standing behind her and her high officers looking on, she would be forced to say whatever they want her to say. And she does offer Uso her protection when he begs for mercy.
That whole scene at the end is so odd. Why does Uso pursue Maria? Did he kill that guard? He knocks the guard off of this little transport that they're on, but hits him with like a cable and connector or magnet from a mobile suit. That, the force of that would probably kill a person.
Yeah, that dude's dead.
Then Maria stops the transport and waits. The politeness and formality with which Uso addresses her, as well as the changes in sound, music, and the color shifting of the animation here, make it feel extremely ominous. Like, what is he thinking here? What is the plan? What is he going to do with her?
Good questions. When Maria is giving that speech to the fleet, she's standing at a podium on a platform overlooking the hangar, and it's very nearly identical to the one Char gives his big speech from in Char's counterattack, even down to the golden eagle on the front of it, although her golden eagle has a big Z in the middle for Zanskar. This is not the first time they have reused set design for Char's counterattack for the Zanskar Empire, but this feels more than just reusing existing assets because it's easier and cheaper. This feels purposeful. But then I wonder, is one of these audience platforms standard issue on every colony? Or was the colony corporation doing a social engineering kind of thing where 1 in every 20 colonies is built with all the infrastructure necessary for authoritarianism? And it's just let's see if it organically develops in these colonies and not in other ones. Like trying to get tomatoes to grow on a trellis.
God, what's that video game?
Anything of Fallout?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or do they sell these flat packed from Space IKEA?
I sometimes get the impression that Chronicle is the one sane man in the asylum. Yet again, security on Zanskar is just atrocious. This woman is your queen. Come on. Chronicle spots a security threat and then gets shut down because he's being rude in the middle of the audience. Because obviously the decorum and appearance of solemnity and dignity is much more important than some pesky security threat that you've just noticed. He is the one who orders the guards to take Maria to safety. They're all just standing there on this platform in the middle of a hangar getting shot at until Chronicle's take the queen to safety. You idiots.
Well, you know what usually happens to the one sane man in the asylum, right?
He goes insane.
Dun 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 dun!
What is Katagina's role?
She closes the door.
And takes Chronicle's phone calls and...
She is his executive assistant / girlfriend. She looks good in a power suit, you got to admit.
She has that comment about how Chronicle is desperate for something to change or for a change. But all I can think is, what is she getting out of this? What does she want?
Also, I was flip earlier about how the only thing she does is close the door, but that door closing scene itself is weird. Like, she sees them coming, she closes the door closes so quickly that several of those Kantios get damaged in the process of trying to land. Was that intentional? Is this like a training exercise? Is it like they're doing some really hard, like, training for breaking into colonies or something, and it just happened that a couple of them got damaged? And we shouldn't understate the significance of this damage, because Chronicle then goes into battle with half of his force. There are 7 of these Kantios. He goes into battle with only 3 wingmen. So imagine how much more successful he could have been if he'd had the full group.
I had thought that the damage to those Kantios was from the fighting that had just been happening outside the colony.
Oh, if you watch carefully, one of them, like, busts an arm off when it crashes into the door as it's closing. I think they're just doing a training exercise. I don't think they're actually fighting out there.
I mean, even if they had been fighting, they could still be damaged landing.
Sure.
It could be either. I had really thought they were coming in from the recent fighting. But Chronicle even has them retreat at one point because they are new to these mobile suits. Most of these pilots are still getting used to these mobile suits, which would lend some evidence to your thought that it's a training exercise. And he doesn't want to sacrifice the pilots or the mobile suits unnecessarily. As emotional as he sometimes seems to get, especially when he's fighting his rival,
that incorrigible child,
he is still fairly cool-headed and sensible. We'll see how long that lasts. One of my favorite scenes of the whole episode has no dialogue and almost nothing happens. There is a fairly extended scene that is just outside the colony and space and the ships and pans across various sort of spacescapes with the beautiful orchestral theme, somewhat ominous, playing over it. And that's it. And it's long for that kind of scene in this show. And it lets you really hear the music and appreciate the music as well.
Yeah. This show so rarely takes time to breathe. It especially stands out in this episode because this episode is so jam-packed with like 2 almost entirely separate stories, each of which could sustain an episode on its own. Like part 1, the fleet escape. In Zeta, that would be a whole episode unto itself.
Yeah, probably they would have ended with everybody realizing they can't get back to the group, or ended with the decision to go to Zanskar Colony, but would not have done that in the same episode.
And the extra time would have been used for more, like, character pieces. Maybe a little bit with Fa wanting to protect the kids, or Camille sulking about Rekoa either deserting, ignoring, or teasing him about something.
Or potentially fleshing out the battle even more. There are some episodes that are basically just a battle.
Or doing some more character work over on the villain side. Yeah, Victory so rarely has time for that. Victory is all go, 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 occasionally taking a break to do a toilet joke. Credit where it's due, you did in fact predict that this would not be the only Jin Jahannam. Perhaps not even the real Jin Jahannam.
Is there a real Jin Jahannam?
A good question.
There may not be.
Really, when you think about it, all Jin's Jahannam are real.
The real Jin Jahannam is the Jin Jahannam in your heart. I suspect Gomez knew, but that no one else did.
I suspect Gomez did not know, but the old man Polycule did.
Interesting. Ness is surprised. We know Ness didn't know. It's possible that Gomez didn't know, but might have suspected. But his comment about admirals don't cry, and then how he has this kind of funny relationship with Jin Jahannam, where sometimes it's clear that he's not even pretending this guy is in charge. You know, he motors off to go help Odello and Warren resupply Uso and is like, handle comms or something. But then later, when he's giving the orders for them to move out, he sort of pretends at deference and was like, if that's all right with you, sir.
See, that's the other reason I think he didn't know before it came out here, because in prior episodes, he hasn't been quite so overtly insubordinate. He's been much more like, yes, sir, we'll do exactly what you say, and then quietly does the other thing.
Mm-hmm.
Here, it's more like, yeah, I know you're not really in charge. We both know that now. Let's drop this whole pretense. I want to go back, real quick, to that scene I hate, the one with Marbet on the fishbone.
Okay.
Because Marbet says, we could just drop Peggy off with the Zanskar Red Cross. Really interesting that the Red Cross still exists. I think that's a great world-building note, one I will incorporate into my knowledge of the Universal Century from now on. Second note, they then immediately commit a really serious war crime. Like the bad one, the perfidy. They do the really bad thing. You cannot dress your ship up to look like an enemy ship and then engage in hostilities while still disguised as an enemy ship. That's textbook perfidy. They, in fact, cannot turn Peggy over to the Zanskar Red Cross after having done that. When Marbet is like, oh, are you prepared to taste Gomez's fist after, I think, Odello has suggested disguising the ships? No, are you prepared to face the Space Heg?
Point of clarification. If they had removed the disguise, if they had stripped away that like red covering that made it look like a Zanskar ship before they attacked.
Yes, that would be okay.
That would be acceptable.
Yes. You can disguise yourself as the enemy. You can use enemy uniforms. You can use enemy insignia or ensigns to infiltrate.
But you have to attack under your own colors.
Exactly.
So Marbet's Zoloat is okay because they've repainted it.
No, they paint hers red again for this episode. Yeah.
Okay.
The Victory is fine and the Guneezy are fine, but the Zoloat and the Fishbone have both been done up in Zanskar colors.
I was more hung up on her suggestion that they would just be able to drop Peggy off. You're going to stash your mobile suits somewhere and then find civilian clothes and then just like, oh, we found this enemy soldier? Like, what? Or Peggy is going to have to get herself there? Or what exactly?
Yeah. I assume, the thing that would make sense would be to surrender, right? Like, that is how you would normally convey one of your wounded soldiers to the enemy's respective Red Cross.
And perhaps that's what she means, is that Peggy should surrender.
Mm-hmm. But no. Instead, they go and violate Additional Protocol 1, Article 39 of the Geneva Conventions, and Article 8.2b, Romanet 7 of the ICC Statute.
Here's the thing, though. Does any of this seem well thought out or make much sense? No, definitely not. Does that seem out of character for Marbet? Not particularly. Marbet is mostly in charge here by dint of being the eldest and having the most experience. That's it.
With the exception of Alicia, this is truly a ship of fools. None of these people should be in charge of anything. Peggy is maybe the most sensible one in the lot, and she's on a lot of painkillers right now. But we need to talk about the most important part of this episode, which are those adorable little defense petite mobile suits that the Zanskar hangar deploys ineffectually against the Victory.
Are those the red ball ones?
They're kind of pinkish, but yeah, they're like red. They transform a little bit, so they have like a cruising mode where they're like a kind of a tadpole looking thing, and then they go on to their like standing mode, and they've got the gun coming out of their heads. They look a bit like balls with arms and legs. You remember balls? We love balls.
That we do.
They're adorable. I love them so much. And they're called Gwigsies.
What?
Gwigsies.
Oh, that makes them exponentially better. Gwigsies.
Gwigsie Gunpla now. Gwigspla.
I do think you should insert into this part of the conversation a clip from the AC/DC song about we like big balls.
I'll consider it. I'll take it under advisement. All right. I can't prove this, but when they're standing on their hind legs, the Gwigsies look suspiciously like the Kobu steampunk mecha from Sakura Wars, which were designed just a couple of months after this. Yeah. And if you look at like early design sketches of the Kobu, one of them includes a pilot wearing an outfit very similar to an outfit we're going to see later on in Victory. I can't tell you too much about it for spoiler reasons, but it's close enough that I'm like, I mean, no one involved would ever admit it if this were true, so I don't know that there's any way to prove this, but come on. Just between you and me.
Just between you and me about that uniform that you can't tell me about because it's a spoiler.
No, I meant like just between you and me. You know, I think this thing inspired that thing, you know. It's like maybe close enough that somebody might get in trouble if I were correct. So let's just, you know, keep it between the two of us. You and me and all the people listening.
I definitely combined reinforce and lean horse at one point in the talkback and called it the lean force or the reen horse or something.
We also have a bit of an Admiral Zobel situation where his name is actually Muterma Sugan. And both of us have taken to calling him Muterman.
But isn't it the Muterman fleet in the subtitles? Or have I just been hallucinating the N at the end of that every time?
I think there's a good chance both of us have just been hallucinating it.
Womp womp. And now Tom undermines me by researching the same topic I already did, the Abigor.
No, my research this week is like a sequel or an appendix to your work.
It just happens to be much longer and more thorough.
It's just that you had already done a lot of the groundwork, and so there was nowhere for me to go but underground. Thanks to behind-the-scenes materials uncovered by Mark Simmons in his history of Victory Gundam's production, we know that the Abigor and its look-alike aquatic counterpart, the Galguyu, were originally given a different name, Leviathan. This practice of assigning working names to mobile suits and then switching them around or changing them altogether as production advances is actually pretty common. You may remember from our coverage of Zeta Gundam that the name Methus, meaning many-eyed, was originally intended for what became the Humbrabi, which has numerous auxiliary cameras. Or that the Marasai was originally scheduled to be called the Domingo, but the name was changed due to a potential trademark conflict. In fact, the same thing happened to Chronicle's new Contio mobile suit. Contio is an old Latin term for an address to the common people by a civil magistrate, or by a general to his soldiers. That seems like something to keep an eye on, now that Chronicle is back in his homeland and seems to be taking a greater interest in Zanskar politics. But for once, I didn't come here to talk about Latin. I want to talk about the suit's original name, Behemoth, because Behemoth and Leviathan form a matched pair, and the decision to use both of them, or the decision to consider using both of them and then deciding to use neither, is itself intriguing, especially in light of the other name references deployed in Victory so far. We use the terms Behemoth and Leviathan in a generic sense for any impressively vast entity. Consider, for example, the seminal political philosophy treatise of Thomas Hobbes, in which he analogizes the state to a vast Leviathan. For by art is created that great Leviathan called a commonwealth or state, in Latin civitas, which is but an artificial man, though of greater stature and strength than the natural, for whose protection and defense it was intended, and in which the sovereignty is an artificial soul, as giving life and motion to the whole body. And though not nearly so famous, Hobbes also wrote a companion piece to Leviathan about the English Civil War, called Behemoth. But in their original sense, Behemoth and Leviathan are specific, individual creatures. Both appear, most famously, in the Old Testament of the Bible, although their true origin is likely far older. Both have been plausibly linked to creatures of pre-Islamic Arabian mythology and to the even earlier myths in the ancient Middle East. Looking forward in time, although their roles in the Bible were minuscule, both creatures proved evocative enough to feature in Jewish and Christian apocrypha and mysticism, eventually filtering through into our own pop culture. While Behemoth appears only once in the Book of Job, and in some translations is omitted altogether in favor of more prosaic translations, Leviathan appears repeatedly, twice in the Book of Job, once in the Book of Isaiah, and in 2 Psalms. Psalm 104 identifies Leviathan as a creature of the sea. There is the sea, vast and spacious, teeming with creatures beyond number, living things both large and small. There the ships go to and fro, and Leviathan, which you formed to frolic there. But if God made Leviathan and set it in the seas to frolic, Psalm 74 casts the relationship in hostility. It was you who split open the sea by your power. You broke the heads of the monster in the waters. It was you who crushed the heads of Leviathan, and gave it as food to the creatures of the desert. Isaiah echoes this, and calls the beast Leviathan a serpent, or a dragon. On the day of salvation, Isaiah predicts, God will slay Leviathan the gliding serpent, the coiling serpent, the monster of the sea. Near the beginning of the book of Job, miserable Job curses the day of his birth, and implores those who curse days and are skilled in rousing Leviathan to curse his own birthday. Presumably, he is referring here to the belief that eclipses were caused by the serpent consuming the sun, and those who curse days are sorcerers who had the power to wake the beast and set it loose to feast on that celestial fire. Later, God addresses Job directly, and in chapters 40 and 41 mentions first Behemoth and then Leviathan as living symbols of his divine power and mortal impotence. Look at Behemoth, which I made along with you, and which feeds on grass like an ox. What strength it has in its loins, what power in the muscles of its belly. Its tail sways like a cedar, the sinews of its thighs are close-knit. Its bones are tubes of bronze, its limbs like rods of iron. It ranks first among the works of God, yet its maker can approach it with his sword. The hills bring it their produce, and all the wild animals play nearby. Under the lotus plants it lies, hidden among the reeds in the marsh. The lotuses conceal it in their shadow. The poplars by the stream surround it. A raging river does not alarm it. It is secure, though the Jordan should surge against its mouth. Can anyone capture it by the eyes, or trap it and pierce its nose? Then, can you pull in Leviathan with a fishhook, or tie down its tongue with a rope? Can you put a cord through its nose, or pierce its jaw with a hook? Will it keep begging you for mercy? Will it speak to you with gentle words? Will it make an agreement with you, for you to take it as your slave for life? Can you make a pet of it, like a bird, or put it on a leash for the young women in your house? Will traders barter for it? Will they divide it up among the merchants? Can you fill its hide with harpoons, or its head with fishing spears? If you lay a hand on it, you will remember the struggle and never do so again. Any hope of subduing it is false. The mere sight of it is overpowering. No one is fierce enough to rouse it. Who then is able to stand against me? Who has a claim against me that I must pay? Everything under heaven belongs to me. I will not fail to speak of Leviathan's limbs, its strength and its graceful form. Who can strip off its outer coat? Who can penetrate its double coat of armor? Who dares open the doors of its mouth, ringed about with fearsome teeth? Its back has rows of shields tightly sealed together. Each is so close to the next that no air can pass between. They are joined fast to one another. They cling together and cannot be parted. Its snorting throws out flashes of light. Its eyes are like the rays of dawn. Flames stream from its mouth. Sparks of fire shoot out. Smoke pours from its nostrils as from a boiling pot over burning reeds. Its breath sets coals ablaze, and flames dart from its mouth. Strength resides in its neck. Dismay goes before it. The folds of its flesh are tightly joined. They are firm and immovable. Its chest is hard as rock, hard as a lower millstone. When it rises up, the mighty are terrified. They retreat before its thrashing. The sword that reaches it has no effect, nor does the spear or the dart or the javelin. Iron it treats like straw, and bronze like rotten wood. Arrows do not make it flee. Slingstones are like chaff to it. A club seems to it but a piece of straw. It laughs at the rattling of the lance. Its undersides are jagged potsherds, leaving a trail in the mud like a threshing sledge. It makes the depths churn like a boiling cauldron, and stirs up the sea like a pot of ointment. It leaves a glistening wake behind it. One would think the deep had white hair. Nothing on earth is its equal, a creature without fear. It looks down on all that are haughty. It is king over all that are proud. You can see how these two mighty beasts would catch the imagination. Behemoth is often depicted as a kind of massive ox, while Leviathan is somewhere on the dragon-serpent-fish continuum. Starting as early as the 8th century AD, some scholars have argued that Behemoth simply refers to the mighty and unconquerable hippopotamus, scourge of land and river alike. This prosaic approach is captured well by Jorge Luis Borges in his Book of Imaginary Beings, the same source, you may remember, from which we get the story of the Abawa coup. 400 years before the Christian era, Behemoth was a magnification of the elephant or the hippopotamus, or an erroneous and frightened version of those two animals. Now it is neither more nor less than those 10 famous biblical verses that describe the creature, and the vast form that they evoke. The rest is exegesis, or philology. In this interpretation, Leviathan would simply be a large crocodile, or perhaps a whale. But their descriptions in the Book of Job accord better to unique mythical creatures. Both beasts feature prominently in the apocryphal and apocalyptic Book of Enoch. In this version, God created the two beasts as a pair, the female Leviathan to dwell in the deep abyss of the ocean, and the male Behemoth to reside in the terrestrial wilderness beyond the garden where the righteous dwell. In the Jewish tradition, it's said that on the day of the resurrection, God will dispatch the angel Gabriel to slay the Leviathan, and when Gabriel fails, God will order Leviathan and Behemoth to battle each other to their mutual deaths, that the flesh of the great serpent might be served at the feasts of the righteous, and its magnificent skin given over to make shelters for them. Although another ancient text, the Syriac Apocalypse of Baruch, says that the meat served to the righteous upon the day of revelation will actually be that of Behemoth. Or maybe it's like a wedding and you can choose either the fish or the beef option. Later interpretations transformed them both into high-ranking demons. According to the 13th century theologian Thomas Aquinas in his commentary on the Book of Job, Behemoth and Leviathan were both demons and metaphors for the devil. According to a translation from the Latin by Brian Mulady, consider that just as the angels who remain in their dignity have a certain excellence above the dignity of men, and so they appear to men in a very brilliant light, so also the demons have a certain excellence and primacy in evil over men, and so they are described using the figures of certain extraordinary and almost monstrous animals. Among all land animals, the elephant excels in size and strength, and among aquatic animals, the whale. So the Lord describes the devil using the metaphor of an elephant and a whale. In Job, God says that Behemoth eats grass like an ox, which Aquinas interprets to mean that Satan delights in dominion over all earthly things. God says that Behemoth's strength is in his loins, his power is in the navel of his belly, and his tail stiffens like a cedar, and Aquinas interprets all of these together as a metaphor for carnal intercourse, and the delight the demons take in luring humans into lustful obscenities. The great strength of the beast expresses the obstinacy of Satan, who will not be diverted from his wickedness, and so on. The metaphor is perhaps somewhat tortured. In the early 16th century, the occultist Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa published an influential account of his demonological studies, De Occulta Philosophia, that identified Behemoth and Leviathan as the chiefs of all devils, subordinate only to Lucifer himself, prince of rebellion, of angels, and of darkness. Then, in 1589, the notorious German witch hunter Peter Binsfeld published his own Treatise on Confessions by Evildoers and Witches, in which he identified the 7 major demons who ruled over each of the 7 deadly sins. Behemoth is absent from the list, but Leviathan is made the master of envy. The Dominican friar, inquisitor, exorcist, and character from Black Butler, Sebastian Michaelis, wrote in 1613 that Leviathan had been a prince among the cherubim, who fell with Satan, and now was a demon of the first order, locked in eternal struggle with St. Peter. His main goal is to lead people into heresy. Then there is the 1818 Infernal Dictionary of Jacques Collin de Plancy, which reinterprets the hierarchy of hell like a European court of his era. Ashtaroth becomes the treasurer, Nergal is chief of hell's secret police, Belphegor is the ambassador of France, and so on. Leviathan then becomes the Grand Admiral and a Knight of the Order of the Fly, while Behemoth occupies the lesser but still prestigious rank of Chief Cupbearer. Outside the demonological tradition, scholars have linked Leviathan to the sea monster Lotan or Litan in the Ugaritic Canaanite tradition. Although such things are always subject to fierce debate, it seems likely that the name Leviathan is derived from Lotan, and it's even possible that the lines about Leviathan in the book of Isaiah quote from the Ugaritic Baal cycle. That cycle tells of how the chief god, El, elevated his favorite child, Yam, to preeminence over the other gods, how Yam tried to use his power to dominate and humble the god Baal, son of Dagon, and how the enraged Baal rebelled against Yam, defeated him, and took the throne in his place. Later on in the cycle, he is taunted by Mot, the god of death, who reminds him that even though he has overcome the coiling serpent Lotan with its 7 heads, even so, Baal will not be able to defeat death. A similar line of thinking developed in the 1890s connected the biblical Leviathan to Babylonian ocean goddess Tiamat, mother of gods and monsters, often depicted herself as a great sea serpent. Modern scholarship has moved away from this idea, favoring the Canaanite origin Lotan, but it would have been prominent in the early 90s when the name Leviathan was suggested, and it's had a big impact on Leviathan's interpretation in the popular culture. Moving forward in time rather than backwards, after appearing in the Book of Job, Behemoth seems to have been adapted into the pre-Islamic mythology of Arabia, where it became not a vast and mighty land animal, but an enormous fish called Bahamut. According to the 13th century cosmography of Zakaria al-Qazvini, the world rests on the broad shoulders of an angel, standing on a stone carried on the back of an ox, which itself stands on the back of the fish Bahamut. One theory has it that the bull and fish described by al-Qazvini are the same creatures as Behemoth and Leviathan, but have simply had their names switched around. Borges endorses this view, writing of the Bahamut that the fame of the Bahamut reached as far as the deserts of Arabia, where men changed and magnified its image. At first a hippopotamus or an elephant, at last it was transformed into a fish that floats in a bottomless sea. Above the fish the men of Arabia pictured a bull, and above the bull a mountain made of ruby, and above the mountain an angel, and above the angel 6 infernos, and above the infernos the earth, and above the earth 7 heavens. I don't quote from Borges here because he's like a serious scholar on the issue, but he does a really good job of capturing how these ancient Middle Eastern mythic creatures have been understood and interpreted by well-educated people operating in the European and American literary traditions. And this is why Tiamat and Bahamut, 2 mythic creatures with no direct relationship to each other, have been reinterpreted as twin dragon gods and ferocious rivals in the cosmic lore of Dungeons & Dragons. Bahamut derives from Behemoth, Behemoth is paired with Leviathan, and Leviathan was thought, accurately or not, to derive from Tiamat. Hence the connection. Well, that's all very interesting. I feel edified by the research process. But does it tell us anything at all about Victory Gundam? I'm not sure, but the fact that the 2 names were suggested together, and then replaced, in one case, with the name of a demon drawn from esoteric Christian mysticism, suggests that Behemoth and Leviathan were chosen because of their later demonic identities and not as a biblical reference. We might wonder then whether all 3 names, Abigor, Behemoth, and Leviathan, were drawn from the same source. We can imagine Tomino or mecha designer Ishigaki, or some other staffer entirely, leafing through a Japanese translation of a demonological grimoire, looking for good names for mobile suits. But different grimoires provide different lists of demons. Leviathan appears in many more of them than Behemoth or Abigor, and as Nina mentioned last week, Abigor appears under different aliases in different grimoires, Abigur, Eligos, Eligor. So any hypothetical single source would need to have all 3 of them, with the right versions of their names. Ideally, it would also have been translated into Japanese sometime before the names first appeared on production documents in 1993. You can probably tell from how specific I'm being here that I have in fact found exactly one candidate that fits the bill. Jacques Collin de Plancy's Infernal Dictionary, originally written in 1818 and republished in 1863 with now famous illustrations of some of the key demons. An abridged, translated version was published in Japan in 1990 by Kodansha, and a full translation followed in 1992 from Seidosha. Unfortunately, I can't narrow it down between those 2 versions, because I haven't been able to determine whether the abridged version contained all 3 demons. If you happen to have a copy of Jigoku no Jiten, translated by Tokonabe Takehiko, would you mind just doing a quick skim through it for Behemoth, Abigor, and Leviathan? If any one of them is missing from the abridged version, probably Leviathan because it's the only one of the three without an accompanying illustration in the original, then that would strongly imply that someone on staff was leafing through their brand new copy of Akuma no Jiten as translated by Otaki Keisuke when they came up with the names for these mobile suits. Of course, this is still just speculation. Short of confirmation from someone on staff or an old photo showing one of the books stuffed into a Studio Sunrise planning office bookshelf, we can't ever know for certain. Or I guess Nina and I could use all the demonology we've learned these past couple of weeks to summon Marbas, great president of hell, who answers truly on hidden and secret matters, and ask him to grant us the forbidden secrets of Gundam's creation. What do you think that would cost us, like soul-wise? Probably not too expensive, right?
We already sold our souls to become artists and podcasters in Brooklyn. I think we might be a little overdrawn if we try to add a demon to the mix.
I don't remember saying anything about offering our souls.
Next time on episode 10.26, The Guillotine Festival, we research and discuss episode 26 of Victory Gundam and Pawn Takes Queen. Chronicle comes this close to getting the Dynastic Kinslayer debuff. Carcinization. Nothing says fun like funicular. Bee. Karate Kid versus the Surveillance State. The Claw. Claw chooses who will go and who will stay. Faith healing. Glory enough to go around. And Zanskar eats its young. Please listen to it.
And by the way, next episode will be the halfway point of Victory, and after next week we'll be taking a break for the rest of August as we prepare for the back half of Victory. We have some big research projects to work on, some birthdays to celebrate, and a few other things to take care of. We'll be back with a new episode on September 7th. Mobile Suit Breakdown is written, recorded, and produced by us, Tom and Nina, in scenic New York City, within the ancestral and unceded land of the Lenape people, and made possible by listeners like you. The opening track is Wasp by Misha Dioxin. The closing music is Long Way Home by Spinning Ratio. The recap music is Slow by Lloyd Rogers. You can find links to the sources for our research, the music used in the episode, additional information about the Lenape people, and more in the show notes on our website, GundamPodcast.com. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can email hosts@GundamPodcast.com or look for links to our social media accounts on our website. And if you would like to support the show, please share us with your friends, leave a nice review wherever you listen to podcasts, or support us financially at GundamPodcast.com/Patreon. You can find links and more ways to help out at GundamPodcast.com/support. Thank you for listening. There are a lot of wrong Gundam opinions out there corrupting the fandom. Wrong opinions like, Victory was a commercial failure because Bandai wasted all of their resources trying to sell different variants of the main Gundam while ignoring the people's obvious hunger for Guigzi merchandise. More Guigzi in more places. We need more Guigzi. Any Guigzi at all actually would be great. I love the aesthetics of all the airgun competitions. Both the outfits and the almost cybernetic looking gear that they wear.
That they wear over their eyes too, which looks like just a sight and a blinder, but they look so odd when you wear them on your face.
There were some very cool photos of, I think, the Chinese team. The jackets, all the different
video
colors.
Games or anime.
The guns look super futuristic, high tech.
The Olympics is great, even though we haven't been watching it.
The Olympics is great except when it's terrible, which is all the time. But it's also great, even when it's terrible, which again is all the time.
The kitten is doing pretty well.
Yeah, She's been a lot more active the last couple of days. Whatever we've been doing seems to be working.
The healing powers of broth. Specially made for kittens, which means it has no salt, no added flavorings. Just boiled meat and bones.
And of course, my tireless efforts to actually get her to consume it. Will you eat it over here? What if I move it 3 inches to the right? Oh, now you're interested.
What if I hold it 2 inches off of the floor? Well, 2 things. I always start that way. This week's episode replaced entirely by the nature sounds we play for the cat.
Listeners, each of us has a bag of treats at their recording station, just in case the cat comes over and needs to be distracted. So if you hear soft crunching noises...
or loud crunching noises.
like those. It's probably not audible on the recording, but it's audible to us.
What's the real Jinjanahan? Blah, blah, blah. I'm Uso Uwin. Evan? Uwin? How are we saying this? Maybe I just won't say it.
Prince of Rebellion, of Angels, and of Darkness. Hello, Prince of Rebellion, Angels, and Darkness, and begging for treats. Would you like a distracting treat since I can't give you what you really want? You have to say that into the microphone.